This is Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. Here now, Tony Bruschi.
This is one of those stories where you read the headline and think, oh, that's the cold open to a horror movie. And you realize, nope, it's Wisconsin's criminal justice system in 2025. Here's what just happened. Morgan Geyser, one of the two girls behind the infamous 2014 Slender Man stabbing, cut off her GPS ankle monitor, walked out of a group home in Madison, and made it all the way to Illinois, south of Chicago, before anyone put the genie back into the bottle. She was picked up at a truck stop in Posen, Illinois, with an adult companion, roughly a day after she slipped away. Now, here's what's going on. We have a woman who, as a 12-year-old, stabbed her friend 19 times in the woods to impress a fictional monster from the internet. And she's out in the community with just a GPS bracelet and a "we'll check on you later" tier of supervision. And shocker, she walked away. She didn't follow the rules. Who would have saw that coming? Certainly not a judge. To really understand why this is outrageous, you have to rewind to where this all started. Back in May of 2014, 3 6th-grade girls in Waukesha, Wisconsin go for what looks like a normal play date. They're 12. They're having a sleepover. They go out to play near a wooded area in Davids Park. 2 of them, Morgan Geyser and Anissa Weir, have been living in an online fantasy world, obsessing over Slender Man, a creepypasta character that does not exist anywhere but the internet and in their own heads. Out in the woods, the fantasy turns into attempted murder. Geyser and Weir lure their friend Peyton Lautner deeper into the trees under the guise of hide and seek. Then Morgan pins Peyton down and stabs her 19 times with a 5-inch kitchen knife. Arms, legs, torso, 2 blows to major organs. 1 stab misses a vital artery by about the width of a human hair. A surgeon later said that if that knife had gone just slightly further, Peyton would be dead. After that, these 2 don't run for help. They tell Peyton to lie down and stay there, then walk away. Supposedly to go find Slender Man in the National Forest 200 miles away. Peyton, bleeding out on the forest floor, somehow crawls her way to a bike path where a cyclist finds her and calls 911. She survives after a 6-hour surgery, but she's left with permanent scars and years of trauma. She's talked about sleeping with broken scissors by the end by her bed because she still fears someone might try to kill her again. So let's be really clear. This is not a prank gone wrong. This is not a playground fight. This is not premeditated, ritualized. This is rather premeditated, ritualized, almost successful child-on-child killing driven by delusion. Legally, Wisconsin treated it as a serious crime. It was, at least at the start. Both girls were charged in adult court with attempted first-degree intentional homicide. That's the same basic tier of seriousness as a planned deliberate murder. Just that the victim, by some miracle and a lot of medical skill, survived. Over time, the case shifts lanes. Morgan Geyser is evaluated and doctors conclude she has a serious mental illness, you think. Early onset schizophrenia, hallucinations, deeply distorted thinking. The legal system does what it often does in these situations. Instead of a straight guilty, the path goes into insanity law. She pleads guilty, but is found not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect and is committed to a psychiatric institution for up to 40 years. Anissa Weir is found not guilty by mental disease or defect as well. She gets up to 25 years in a mental health facility. That's the trade-off insanity law makes. We're not going to call you legally responsible in the normal way, but in theory, we're going to prioritize treatment and confine you until you're no longer dangerous. Sounds good on paper, except you're always going to be dangerous. We're going to go over here and pretend that we've done everything to make you not dangerous, and that when you are dangerous again, we're going to be shocked, floored. How could they still be dangerous? I don't know, because they thought a fictitious character was having conversations with them, and the only way to appease them was to kill their friend at 12. 12-year-olds with healthy brains don't think that way. No one thinks that way. And once your brain starts thinking that way, there's not a lot of pulling that back. Yes, you can medicate. Yes, you can do things of that nature. And thankfully so. But you know what? That brain still works that way. And without the proper supervision, without the confinement, and someone forcing you to take your medication on a daily basis, guess what can happen? You can go back. You can start doing crazy shit again because your brain is fundamentally broken. It is what it is. I'm not going to sugarcoat this shit. She's never going to be a safe human being out in the wild. That's the trade-off insanity law makes. We're not going to call you legally responsible in the normal way, but in theory, we're going to prioritize treatment and confine you until you're no longer dangerous. You will always be dangerous. You put a lion in a cage at a zoo for years. Does it make them any less dangerous? Because they haven't had to go out into the wild and kill other beasts for food? No, it doesn't. It's the same with people. Unfortunately, people are stupid as shit that make these sort of decisions. So who's the crazy one here? Fast forward a few years, both girls are at the Winnebago Mental Health Institute. They're teenagers now, living in a locked psychiatric world instead of a prison. Peyton Lautner is out there trying to rebuild her life with the knowledge that the two people who tried to kill her are being treated instead of serving straight time. Then comes the step-down process. Anissa Weir gets supervised release in 2021 at the age of 19. She's out under very tight conditions. GPS monitor, no internet, without approval, constant check-ins. And let me just ask you, how is that even realistically possible? No internet without approval? Yeah, good luck with that one. And your constant check-ins, I'm sure they're every day. Morgan Geyser's path is a little bumpier. She files for conditional release, withdraws it, files again. In January 25, a Waukesha County judge grants her petition for conditional release from that 40-year commitment, essentially saying, yes, we're open to you leaving the hospital under conditions. Then the red flags start popping up. Staff at the hospital report that Morgan has been reading material with themes of sexual sadism and murder and communicating with a man on the outside who collects murder memorabilia. Huh! Those are not small details for someone whose crime was literally ritualized violence tied to fantasy. A judge pumps the brakes for a while in early 2025, staying her release and setting hearings to dig into this. But here's where the continued leniency piece comes in. Despite those red flags, despite state health officials expressing concern in March of this very year where this very escape took place about her behavior and communications, the court ultimately decides those issues don't change the core conclusion, that Morgan is well enough and can be moved towards release. What could possibly go wrong? The judge finds no evidence that she was intentionally lying, credits the testimony of 3 doctors who say she's ready, and keeps the release planning on track. By July of 25, the same judge signs off on a conditional release plan. What could possibly go wrong? I mean, look at the track record. Morgan Geyser, the girl who almost killed a classmate to please an internet demon, is now a 22-year-old woman the state is preparing to put back into the community. The plan is she leaves Winnebago County, goes into a group home, is supervised until 2058. remains under GPS and gets reevaluated periodically in case they decide she needs to be brought back in. Yeah, this will work out well. Even that process runs into friction. And I'd also say fiction. The first group home option in Milwaukee is rejected because it's too close to the victim. The second home in Manitowoc pushes back because it's too isolated and the residents don't want her there. Excuse me. Eventually, Wisconsin's Department of Health Services gets her placed in a Madison area group home under court order in January. And she's in the community under state supervision, yes, but not locked hospital doors anymore. And that's how we got to this weekend. According to authorities, on Saturday night, Morgan Geyser removes her GPS ankle monitor and walks away from that group home with an adult acquaintance. The Department of Corrections gets an alert that her monitor is malfunctioning. But instead of this turning into a drop everything, this is an emergency moment, there's a lag. The DOC investigates, discovers, oh, she took it off. And Madison police aren't notified until almost 12 hours later when the group home finally calls 911 to report she's gone. Oh, the system's working smoothly, isn't it? By the time this machine finally lumbers into action, she's already out of the state. About 24 hours after she left, she's picked up at a truck stop in Posen, Illinois, south of Chicago, and taken into custody. So let's sit with that for a brief second. We have a person who, as the child, carried out one of the most disturbing crimes in recent memory. We have a history of delusion so severe that the entire legal basis for her being where she is rests on mental disease or defect. We have a recent behavioral question, violent reading material, weird contact with a murder memorabilia guy that were concerning enough to delay her release earlier this year, and the ultimate structure we put around that person when we finally let her out is a group home and a bracelet she can physically cut off, staff who apparently don't hit the panic button for hours, and a communication chain that means state corrections knows there's a problem long before the local cops do. And then everyone's shocked that she walked. This is where that uncomfortable pattern you're pointing to comes into focus. The crazier someone is, the more unhinged the original act, the more our system sometimes bends itself into a pretzel to understand, to treat, to eventually reintegrate the most clearly disturbed, someone who demonstrates they are capable of violence while detached from reality person. The faster the machine seems to move towards. Well, they've done a lot of therapy. The meds are working. Let's test some freedom. This makes no sense. The more clearly someone demonstrates they're capable of violence while detached from reality, the faster the machine moves towards, let's let him out. No, let's not. Because something isn't working correctly up there. They're a danger to themselves and others. They have a pattern of this behavior. This isn't a just, I'm in a really shitty place, I'm going to make a really bad choice, or I'm really mad at you and I'm going to do this. This is shit is not firing right. So let's give them more freedoms? That's more humane? Being less stringent, being less strict on someone who can't manage their freedom, can't manage themselves, can't manage their own mental health because of what they were born with, because their brain doesn't work right, which is not their fault. But you know what? It is our fault if we can't recognize that and say, you're a danger. We don't want you to continue to be a danger to yourself or others. We don't think you truly want to go kill your friends and family. But unfortunately, your brain is going to keep telling you to do that. So we have to hold you back. That is the definition of being humane, holding them back from doing those things, not, well, let's give them a second shot. No, that's called fucking insanity. Again, who's the crazier one? The judge that says, let's see what happens. Or the one who hears voices, tries to kill her friend, knows she's on a tight leash, and still gets in touch and starts a relationship with murder memorabilia guy and gets into sexual sadism material. And says, the judge says, well, it seems like you've learned your lesson. Who's the crazier? The judge or the person who actually is crazy? Meanwhile, if you're a relatively ordinary attempted killer, no elaborate mythology, no diagnosis that fits nicely into an insanity box, you're just in prison, steel doors, limited movement, no group home to stroll away from under the cover of darkness. Now, to be fair to the law, this isn't just Wisconsin freelancing. Insanity verdicts everywhere are built around a promise. We're not going to punish you the same way, but we're going to lock you up as long as you're dangerous. The problem is how aggressively the system wants to find that magical turning point where you're suddenly not dangerous anymore. Because to the rest of the world, to the sane people who are dangerous, who've shown a pattern of dangerous behavior, have been diagnosed with severe mental illness, they're always going to be dangerous. That doesn't change. But in this case, you're young, you're female, you're remorseful, in the right lighting, medicated, saying all the right things in front of evaluators, even though most of the time she hasn't. In Morgan Geyser's case, 3 doctors testified she was stable enough for conditional release. The judge bought it, even over concerns from health officials and over objections from prosecutors and from the victim's family, who've been very clear they don't believe this is a risk worth taking. And look what conditional release actually means in practice. It's not a secure forensic halfway house that she was in with fencing and alarms. It was a group home. These are usually low security residential settings. They're houses where staff, if there is staff, are watching multiple people, not posted at a sally port with a metal detector. Your big safety mechanism is a plastic box on an ankle that can be cut off with the right tool and enough determination. And then a monitoring system that depends on humans interpreting an alert the right way and acting fast. That all might be fine if we're talking about someone who stole cars or passed bad checks. This is a person whose origin story in this system is luring a friend into the woods and almost carving her to death because a fictional internet ghoul told her to do it. And by the way, she's not even the only one out. Anissa Weir has been in the community since 2021, living under supervised conditions. In other words, Peyton Lautner's perspective, from her perspective, the 2 people who tried to kill her now have been deemed safe enough by the same state that once promised to protect her. People will say, well, Morgan didn't hurt anyone during the escape. She was found without incident. That's true, as far as we know right now. But that's not the point. The point is, why was this even possible? Why did Wisconsin build a system where someone with this history has the option of simply walking off into the night and getting across state lines before anyone meaningfully responds? This is where the judge's decision and the state's choices absolutely deserve scrutiny. Nobody is saying the court should have thrown her into a dungeon and tossed away the key. But when you've got documented concerns, when your own hospital people are flagging behavior and outside contacts that feel like a relapse into violent fantasy, and when the crime itself is this extreme, maybe optimistic isn't the right posture. Yet the system leaned optimistic. It's leaned therapeutic. It's leaned, let's give her a chance. And trusted that a group home and a bracelet would hold the line. And this is the part where a lot of people listening to this are going to feel their blood pressure go up. If Morgan Geyser had been an adult man who nearly killed a 12-year-old girl in the woods, we all know how this story ends. He's in prison, full stop. But because she was 12 when it happened, because it was couched in mental illness, because it came dressed in the language of delusion in childhood and treatment, the whole system recalibrated around empathy for the attacker rather than enduring protection for the victim and the public. There is another layer here that's hard to ignore. Institutional self-preservation. Nobody in this chain wants to be the one who says, no, she stays locked up. In a world where we're constantly told our mental health care system is punitive and cruel, judges don't want to be painted as heartless, doctors don't want to admit that some people, even medicated, might never be safe enough to walk around with nothing between them and the rest of us but an ankle monitor and a curfew. Bureaucracies don't want to carry the cost of decades of inpatient care, so we get this strange inversion. The more extreme, bizarre, and unhinge the original act, the more the system feels pressure to eventually give them another shot. First with supervised release, then group homes, then more freedom. The narrative becomes, she's not a monster. She was sick. She got help. We have to believe people can change. Sure. But here's the uncomfortable question. At what point does believing people can change turn into playing Russian roulette with the public? This weekend's little road trip to Illinois is a perfect example of what happens when that optimism collides with reality. The system had one job after granting release. Make sure she does not just vanish. It failed. Peyton Lautner is still out there living with what these two did to her body and her mind. Her family has to watch hearing after hearing where the question isn't, how do we keep this dangerous person contained? But how quickly can we transition her into the community? You don't get to nearly kill a child and then have the whole structure of justice contort itself around your comfort level forever. At least you shouldn't. If you're dangerous enough that we're saying, you'll be supervised until 2058 with periodic evaluations to see if we need to reinstitutionalize you. Maybe that's a clue you weren't ready to be walking out the front door of a group home in the first place. Call me crazy. And if the only thing stopping you from disappearing into the night is a strap of plastic and electronics around your ankle, maybe we haven't actually managed the risk. We've just outsourced it to luck and timing. So yes, it is good news that Morgan Geyser has been recaptured. It's good that this didn't end in another act of violence, another tragedy. But the fact that we're even talking about Slender Man attacker captured after escape tells you everything you need to know about how fragile this setup was. The horror movie vibe here isn't just the original crime. It's the sequel the state wrote for itself. A would-be killer declared insane, slowly stepped down from a locked facility to community living. Red flags waved and mostly folded, a GPS anklet treated like a force field, and then surprise, she walks for almost 24 hours. Wisconsin and Illinois got a real-time stress test of what happens when we think she's doing better meets we didn't build a system that assumes she might not be. And the big uncomfortable takeaway in this is pretty obvious. In too many of these cases, the more extreme, bizarre, and unhinged the original act, the more the system gravitates towards leniency wrapped in clinical language. The saner you are, the more you just rot in a cell. The more out there your delusions, the more likely it is that one day somebody's going to stamp conditional release and trust that you'll behave. This weekend showed us what that trust looks like when it breaks. And if we're not willing to rethink how we handle people like Morgan Geyser, people who have a proven track record in the most brutal way possible, exactly what they're capable of when they're reality fractures, then we're just waiting for the next headline that reads like a horror script and ends with, "This time, someone didn't make it out alive." Give me your thoughts in the comments section on YouTube. If you're not there already, please do hit subscribe. Please, your thoughts, though. Until next time, I'm Tony Bruschi. We'll talk again real.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Bruschi and the Hidden Killers podcast.